career insights to some of us.
Yeah.
Would we be in computers if it wasn't for Revenge of the Nerds?
That's a good
I'm
question.
not sure I ever saw that movie. I didn't know it was about. I didn't know there were computers involved.
Oh yeah.
You've got to see it.
It's
I'll
a
have to
movie.
add that
It
to my
hasn't
list. I'll just check it
aged
out.
well, though, if you actually watch it.
Well,
Oh, really?
well, no,
Many of those 80 movies that haven't quite aged well.
no, they haven't.
Especially the cringy comedies or whatever you
Yeah.
want to call them.
Yeah, they wouldn't make it in 2024 at all. Like, definitely wouldn't. So yeah. But time after time, the Queen song. We are the champions. Talk to me, Skolnick.
Yeah, no. What got me into computers was before then, anyways. So
Oh yeah, what was
I'm
that?
old. My dad actually buying a computer in 79, 80 before even War Games came out.
Yeah.
I started programming it a few months after he got it because I was bored with playing games on it. So
That's cool.
The golden years.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So yeah, and I had the fun like with that early computer that was also bought in like the 80s, and then you would tinker with it. You would change something, and then it's like my father's out on trips. He's coming back home. You have to figure out how to undo what you just did before he gets back. So that makes it really good. That turns you into like a really good like computer hacker of like, I'm gonna try making this better. If I can make it better and nobody will notice, then it stays in place. But otherwise, like if you try and fail, it's like, okay, you better figure out how to reverse this and put the computer back together.
Yeah, you learn a lot that way. Trying to put things back the way they were.
Put things back the way they were, and it's like I swore all this stuff fit before I opened it, and then you go, it's like
missing screws. Don't worry about it. It still works.
You screw it back together, and you're like, wait, where'd this piece come from?
Yep.
Or you find out that it's like you never put the piece back in, and it still runs fine, and you go, well, I guess they didn't need that. Like that was redundant. I guess.
Yeah.
Oh.
I got my start in computers with the Little Professor calculator.
Oh, I remember that.
I'm joking, and I'm not. I'm not good at math, so I don't know how I ended up in this career.
I remember.
Turns out you don't need much math in this career, I think. Like I remember getting that advice in school. Like if you want to go into anything computer related, if you want a computer science degree, you've got to know a lot of math. And well, I never did finish that 4-year computer science degree, but turns out you don't need much math.
Close enough.
Yeah.
Subnetting gives me the cold sweats.
No, I was crazy, and I did I passed differential equations on the first time, and then I promptly decided to switch to political science and then get into hacking. Because I was like, I don't need this. I'm like, this isn't what I want to do. I don't want to do differential equations and eigenvectors. And there's someone in the chat that knows what eigenvectors is. So I didn't want to do that for the rest of my life. And I'm like, wait, I can just be a poli-sci major and get into infosec. Who knew?
Oh, my first main computer, the house computer, was the old 486 with the turbo button.
Oh yeah.
The turbo
I better
buttons.
go get my cane.
I had a turbo button. Those were like, wait, why would I not want to turn that on?
Right.
Just
I'm like,
leave it on all the time.
Crank it up.
So is this the old geezer show? Do we just turn off all the young people? They're like, what the heck are they talking about?
Sure did.
Oh wait, Corey's here.
What are you talking about? Are you talking about the save button?
The great the gray beard gala. Yeah, we really did.
We're talking about our first computer.
Yeah, I think the turbo button went from 33 megahertz to 66 or something very dramatic like that.
Oh, holy cow.
You know you're old when your second computer was a Commodore 64.
You know what? Yeah, that's wow. Yeah, that's all I got to say.
Not old.
I have no comments. I'm not.
No comment.
little piece of trivia. Wade picked up on this from another podcast I was on a year ago. This desk back here is the desk that housed my Commodore 64 when I was a kid in junior high and high school.
Wow.
It's an antique.
Nice.
Yeah,
classic.
And it still works for a computer desk. I've got an older Intel processor sitting on there right now, along with a Raspberry Pi.
Look at that.
Are there Cheetos in the drawer too?
There is no drawer. They didn't have drawers on those. It was just a simple table with 2 levels to it.
With the tin can Nestle Quick for chocolate milk.
Oh, yeah. You had to pry the lid off?
Yeah, pry the lid off.
Corey, are you ready to talk
yeah,
about
showing
chicken
age.
stuff?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm only here for the chicken stories. I don't care. If it's not chicken, I don't want to talk about it.
You saw the lights change when he said it's not chicken.
It has to be chicken.
All right, so
Has to
this
be
is a
chicken.
pre-show story because it's not an official story. But yeah, there's another chicken-related crime that we have to talk about because I don't know if they're related. Maybe they are because we last story we determined that there's a black market for chicken, or there must be some sort of a black market for chicken. Maybe this
Whoa,
is it.
this isn't chicken, actually. I will say my name is technically wrong because it was actually salted duck. It wasn't chicken.
Yes.
And basically, salted
Whoops,
duck was used to potentially bribe an official. I guess I got to say, how do you have a security clearance if you can be bribed with duck?
I can be bribed with live duck. Okay.
No, they weren't live.
I know.
They were salted.
I know. I don't want salted ducks.
These are salted ducks. Okay. I don't know what that means, but
That it's good on a pizza.
They're gourmet ducks.
I guess I need to change my name to poultry-based crime expert. I'm getting interviewed for the next History Channel show. I can't wait. They always found the most specific experts for the History Channel. They'll be like, oh, yeah, I'm a 17th century bladed weapons expert. It's like just some random guy that's like, yeah, I know about swords.
No, I guess that's all we had to say about the poultry.
Apparently it's so good it's worth doing crime for it.
It must be.
They just put it on her bill.
Is that a pun? Puns are banned.
Oh, they are?
No. But this U.S. official is about to be banned.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I don't even know. I guess this official worked for the government of New York State specifically. So.
What were they getting in exchange for the ducks?
No. They were getting. Oh, what were they giving? You mean like what were they? What was the corruption?
Yeah. What were they selling for ducks?
Well, I don't think they were selling anything. They were basically just giving, giving favorable. Apparently, they blocked. So, and this is all in the article, but basically, actions benefited the People's Republic of China and the Communist Party. They blocked Taiwanese officials from having access to the governor's office. Eliminated. So it was mostly anti-Taiwan stuff. Mm-hmm. But basically it was like, ensured that state officials did not publicly address the persecution of Uyghur Muslims and all that good stuff. So, normal cover up combined with blocking access to people that you don't think deserve it. So the old corruption, the classic corruption.
The colossal corruption.
Yeah. All in exchange. It was more than ducks. Unfortunately, I think it'd be better if it was just for the ducks. That'd be a better story. It was like, I'm sorry, I just really like duck. All right, I'm going to go to prison now. Yeah, but also included travel benefits and just money, which is super boring.
Yeah. I mean, I was thinking that would make like an interesting pre-show banter question. And it's like, what wild item could be your bribe other than the obvious money?
Yeah, it has to be. I mean, apparently duck. Maybe I need to get my hands on some of this duck.
Yeah.
Well, they sent these beautiful salted ducks to the parents of the senior aide. And honestly, it's something to consider, especially with in-laws. If you're in a heap of trouble or you're trying to impress your in-laws, maybe send salted ducks.
Okay. It's the new version of flowers. Honestly, I'm not a huge fan of duck. Is anyone a huge duck fan in here?
No, live ducks.
I've never had.
It's kind of gamey. It's kind of, I don't know. I'm not a huge. It's kind of fatty. Not a big fan. Anyway, I
Can't
guess we
say
should
I've
do
had
the
it.
show. Sadly, this
Might
isn't
as well.
a food podcast. That's
All
the
right,
other
here we go.
podcast.
Here we go.
Hello and welcome to Black Hills Information Security's Talkin Bout news. It's September 9th, 2024. We're here to talk about poultry-based spy efforts. We're here to talk about, honestly, YubiKeys. Who's been reading up on the YubiKeys stuff? Because I think that's kind of a spicy one.
Ooh, spicy.
So Ryan will find the article, but the long and short of it is some researchers disclosed an attack that allows you to clone YubiKeys, which YubiKeys are kind of for those that don't know, they're kind of the golden standard, I would say, for security authentication keys, hardware physical keys, like it shows a picture there of the little USB guys. But basically attackers or researchers have a way to clone them. But I will say, I mean, Loki already spoiled it in chat, but it's a little overblown because it requires physical access to the key, as you'd imagine, for cloning. It requires over $10,000 in equipment, and it requires you to disassemble and reassemble the YubiKey. So it's kind of like, for anyone other than chicken or poultry-based spies, probably not going to get targeted with this. And again, you do have to also have physical access to the key. So, I guess if you keep your keys in a safe spot, probably not going to be affected by this.
According to the article, you probably have to have access to the person's username and password.
Yeah, you do, and possibly also their PIN. So it's you really need all the things. It's pretty overblown. I will say, credit to the researchers. It's a very awesome. It is really interesting if you read how they disclosed the attack. They actually had to reverse engineer. So to get into a little bit of technical details, there's a company called Infineon. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but that actually makes the cryptographic chips, like the secure enclave or whatever you want to call it, on the YubiKey. And that library that they provide is the vulnerable library. And it's totally undocumented. You have to sign NDAs or whatever to even get access to the documentation, all that good stuff. So credit to the researchers. I'm sure this one was really difficult to investigate and discover when everything's closed and you had to reverse engineer it, but still really cool, I think. But probably the modern equivalent of Van Eck phreaking or whatever. It's not going to get used unless you're a super high value spy who also uses YubiKeys.
Corey,
not to duck the issue on this one, but I really think the big takeaway, big takeaway on this one just happens to be the fact that you can't upgrade the firmware. If you are that concerned about it that you want to fix the problem, you have to buy all new YubiKeys.
That is true. I really hope some company doesn't read this and be like, all right, get new YubiKeys now. They probably will. But.
Yeah, they'll be screaming, where's the purchase order? Let's go.
But I wouldn't recommend that. I don't know.
I think you bring up a good point, though, Corey, because remember, we were talking about some of us who have been around the block a few times. Do you remember when we had the old RSA tokens and everyone thought, okay, these things are perfect. No one's going to be able to hack in them. People would have them on their key rings. You'd see them at football games, and we got overly confident about how secure the RSA tokens are. I think maybe we got a bit overconfident with how secure the YubiKey tokens are as well. So in a way, this is kind of a good reminder that everything can be broken eventually.
I don't know. I think the YubiKeys, even as implemented now, are still pretty secure. I think if you ask me, would you rather have traditional MFA or a YubiKey that's vulnerable to this attack? I'd still think a YubiKey that's vulnerable to this attack is more secure than traditional MFA. I
agree with you on that. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's nice to have the physical device. But some people were going along the camp of thinking, oh, this is indestructible. It's unhackable. And I don't think anything is.
That is true.
Nothing's unhackable. Nothing.
Yeah, and I will say, like, you could argue, oh, why didn't they let people update the firmware? Probably so people wouldn't backdoor their own firmware unintentionally, right? So it's like, I'm assuming that decision to not allow people to update the firmware was intentional. It's kind of annoying that now you have to buy a new YubiKey if you want a fully secure one. But I think at the end of the day, the YubiKey is still the gold standard. It's just if you really want the DoD compliant or whatever version, now you have to buy another one, unfortunately.
Well, I also like how like the cloning of the YubiKey isn't necessarily like a core issue, because like prior to this cloning vulnerability, like you still had that same threat vector. Somebody steals your YubiKey, knows your usernames and password, logs in, and they just give it back to you without cloning it, because oftentimes the level of access they have, that one time is enough to do the damage they need to do.
To add another YubiKey.
Yeah, you could just add another YubiKey. Yeah, that was already a threat model, but now you go, it's like, okay, well now they can clone it, and suddenly everybody's hair's on fire. And it's like, well, but the YubiKey had problems, had this threat vector before, and were you worrying about it then?
Yes,
I really feel this is just another case, and we've all seen it over all the years of stunt hacking, where people get blown out of their minds because of something that, you see it with like the laser can go ahead and listen through the walls and tell you exactly what data is on this.
Right.
What's the real risk factor on it? It's really another lesson in, is this a risk factor, or is this just something that's going to wind up being sensationalized just because of how secure we thought something was?
I will say I get what you're going with the stunt hacking thing, but I think it's more just the cutting edge of security research, because as Kelly said, these things were kind of vaunted as the most unhackable thing on the planet. And it's good to kind of get a reality check of, this isn't actually unhackable, or, so I agree with you that like, it isn't going to be impactful. I agree with you there, but I do think this is an example of like, I think it's more about the researchers saying, everyone's saying YubiKeys are perfect. Let's go ahead and prove they're not perfect. Right. They do have vulnerabilities. And another thing that Char mentioned in chat was these Infineon chips are used in more than just YubiKeys. They're also used in cryptocurrency wallets. I would imagine they're probably used on cell phone, like to store biometrics or things like that. These chips are standard chips, so reverse engineering them is pretty impactful, even if the fix isn't like a MSO 8067 patch now, or you'll be join configure botnet tomorrow situation.
Well,
so you can look at it.
Who knows what grows out of like this stunt hacking as well? Because I remember, like, even from pager capturing, like, remember like when that first showed up on the scene, and it was like, it was some story where it's like somebody had like these weird like rabbit ears and tinfoil, and they were able to pick up like the pager messages that were going around the hospital, and they're like, that's stunt hacking. Now you can do that with like an SDR, like a $20 tool, like $20. You go, I can pull that from 3 counties away. I can pull that stuff. So it starts as kind of like this proof of concept stunt hacking, and then it becomes like a real threat. Which, yes, nowadays, like even today, you can still pull some sensitive information just over pager capturing.
But isn't that how all hacks start? I mean, if you think about it, right? Like if it's like, even for example, like mobile phones, right? Back in the day, like with Android or whatnot, it's like, okay, cool. You get like Linux on a phone or whatnot. And then people try to figure out ways on how to hack that. And it's like a little bit of research turned into a wider gap of research. And now it's turned into something like phenomenal, So that's what I look at when it comes to like YubiKeys. Like, we may say, this is a stunt hack or whatnot, but this could open the door to more impressive research. So kudos to the researchers that found the time to get in there and start digging away and looking at things.
And
I wasn't meaning to try and disparage the research portion.
No.
It's one of those things that the everyday person will look at this and start to get worried. And to us, it is an initial research thing, which is why I like to call it a stunt hack. It was done as a stunt to show that this could happen. But the reality of it at this point in time is that right now it's not something that somebody has to worry about. The YubiKeys are still safe.
Correct.
And Infineon's working on it. And I do believe I haven't looked at the article in a couple of weeks, but I do believe it was like one specific firmware of it, and
yes,
earlier
but
ones
keep in
and
mind
later
that
ones, and way earlier and way later ones were not affected by the same hack.
Yeah, it's one library version of the Infineon library that they provided. So the firmware though is baked into the hardware and you can't change it. So I will say for most people, like they're like, YubiKey, what the hell is that? I don't think a lot of people know what a YubiKey is.
You know what? You're not too far from that. Yeah.
Yeah, most people are like, oh, you mean when it texts me the code? Is that good or bad? But yeah, I mean, for CISOs or for, I don't think decisions, like in the chat, some people have had some good, basically like, if you already have these in deployment and live, I don't think you need to go like panic and recall all of them and immediately upgrade, unless you're like the NSA or the FBI. If you're just a normal company. And then in the future, you probably shouldn't be rolling out vulnerable YubiKeys. You should probably cut new deployments until you can get your hands on some new ones. So it's definitely, and it's a really bad time to buy YubiKeys on eBay.
So hold on to those purchase orders, folks.
Yeah. So I don't know. I thought that was a kind of, also just to kind of like as a final thing, it does require valid credentials and the user's PIN. So if you have a PIN on your YubiKey, which if you don't, what are you doing? Then it is not really vulnerable unless your PIN is 1, 2, 3, 4 and the attackers guess it. So yeah. Anyway, that was a fun little article. Does anyone have any any poultry based articles we can go to next? Or chicken or any of that? No.
I think we're all being chicken about it.
Oh.
Well, I see something from on the list here from like researcher Jeremiah Fowler. So I don't know if that would that
friend
would
of
be
the show.
related. Friend of the show.
Yeah.
Chicken related.
Chicken related.
Fowler, poultry. I don't know. I'm just trying.
That's a stretch, but we'll go with it.
Has anyone read the article and wants to run through it? Because I have not.
Yeah, I skimmed it. It looks like there was patient data that was stored on some kind of cloud storage service. I don't know what the service was. I didn't see that in there. But basically something akin to a misconfigured S3 bucket, because it mentions in the article that there was an or a misconfiguration in there that caused all this patient data to be exposed. What was interesting to me was the patient data for this company included things like recordings of telehealth sessions with patients where they're talking to a therapist or something like that. And there was
so
gigabytes
insane.
and gigabytes of this.
Yeah.
It said 5.4 terabytes. That's great.
Yeah. So
that's
tons.
insane.
Yeah. So it sounded like it was pretty serious.
The main question is it confidant health or confident health?
I think it's
That's a good
question.
Confidant health. Apparently not a very good confidant, if we're being honest. I mean, this kind of cloud exposure, was it like an S3 bucket, or was it like just kind of one of those like iDoors or something, like a web app thing? At the bottom, we'll have to...
It just mentioned a misconfiguration and cloud services, that it was stored on a cloud service. So that's all I saw in there, is with like as specific as I got.
Yeah. I mean, it is, I guess, like, let's just assume it's either S3 bucket exposure or some kind of backup file exposure or something like that. But I will say, like, you're right to be very confused about why this would even be recorded. Even if you are a therapist, I mean, I don't think it's normal to record therapy conversations at all.
I thought it wasn't allowed. I mean, it
seems,
yeah, you would think that it wouldn't be allowed. Like, it could just be, ephemeral.
Totally.
But it's a virtual company, so they're probably offering healthcare services or mental health care services to people who are nowhere near a therapist. Sure, so it has to be virtual, but doesn't have to be recorded.
Exactly. I mean, maybe they're trying to enrich the data. I mean, they're trying to sell the data, if we're being honest. They're trying to say 42% of people mentioned alcohol in their conversation with their therapist. Like, who shocker. I don't know. Just like, this kind of data shouldn't be stored in the first place. And if it is being stored for some reason, it shouldn't be stored in an exposed manner. We'll have to have Jeremiah on the show and have him run through the...
Yeah, the only thing I can think of as far as why they would record it, etc., is in the past they'd used like tape recorders, but they'd keep the tapes just for being able to double check their transcript to make sure that they got everything for their notes going forward. That's the only reason I could think of.
True.
That
and I guess Loki also mentioned could be Snowflake. Something to think about. So, yeah. I mean, but again, who would give their recordings of all their health things to some random Snowflake contractor? Anyway.
Well, it is 2024.
That's true. Are you a big data scientist? Come and tell us how we can sell things better.
One thing I'll point out that stood out to me in the article, I just thought this was kind of interesting, was when they were talking about the investigation into checking and seeing if this data was accessed by any real-world attackers, because this was accessed, by the security researcher. They reached out to the company, and then they checked to see if, has anyone else accessed it. And allegedly, no other malicious actors had accessed it. But they also mentioned that, according to their logs, no AI, like systems of any kind had accessed it. I thought that was pretty interesting for them to point out, because that is a whole nother potential threat model and risk. That what if all of those videos had been ingested by some artificial intelligence? That would expose that data in a whole new way.
Yeah, let me go ask ChatGPT what people talk about in therapy and see what it comes up with.
Man.
Or what that one specific person talked about in therapy potentially.
Yeah, true. Let's say my name is blah. What do I talk about in therapy?
Chicken.
Yeah. Would this be a good time to segue to the story on the California AI bill?
Yeah. Hit us with the bill.
Okay. As many of you already have heard, the California AI bill, SB 1047, did pass. This was a law, for those of you who aren't familiar with, has sparked a lot of conversations going back and forth, a lot of people for it and a lot of people against it. The reason why there was a lot of bits and pieces to this bill, first of all, they wanted the ability to screen for potential cybersecurity risks or infrastructure risks in the AI models. They also wanted a mechanism to basically pull the plug. Is there a way to quickly and fully shut down the model?
What you mean is cut the hard lines. We've seen The Matrix. Cut the hard lines. Cut the power to the building.
Cut it.
Cut the power to the building. Sir, the building's in Netherlands. We can't cut the power.
So there was so a number of the large AI companies in California, like OpenAI or I can't think of the other one. It'll come to me in a minute. Anthropic. Thank you. Said, hey, we're concerned that the specifications you put in the bill are too limiting and it's going to crush startups and small companies. So I do applaud California in that they listened to feedback from some of the larger companies. Interestingly enough, the California Chamber of Commerce was against the bill because they were concerned it was going to impact jobs or make California as a state less exciting or less inviting for new businesses. But eventually the bill did pass. It is sitting on Governor Newsom's desk. He's got until September 30th to sign it or not sign it. But the thing that's kind of interesting from a governance point of view is they're trying to establish AI standard of care or due care. And I don't think that is a bad conversation to have.
I just like that they're... Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. I was just going to say, it sounds like a lot of companies are worried about their golden goose going away.
Which is fair. I mean, now I would say they're definitely not going to duck the issue. I used the same one. I can't do it. I can't.
Go.
I can't do it. I'm only an expert on crime. I don't know anything about chicken puns.
At least put some dressing on it.
Oh, wow. All right. The other joke I was going to make, which is super on topic, is that they're creating a board of frontier models. Okay. I have to imagine a scenario where like some old politician is like looking at available committees to join and is like, ooh, there's a board of models. I'd like to be on that board and look at models all day. And then joins it and is like, what the hell is an LLM? What is happening? I don't know what any of these acronyms mean. Where's the models? Bring in the models.
Lavish large modules.
I think that's a standard.
Gotta throw the lavish in there.
That's a standard government committee to not understand what any of it is about or any of the acronyms.
I mean,
I don't know what these acronyms mean. I'm not going to join this. It's like, that doesn't stop politics.
I have such mixed feelings on this because on one hand, California has such a bad track record of like making bills that are based on vibes, like Prop 53 or whatever, the one about the cancer warnings or whatever, is just so ridiculous. It's like you're going into a hotel in California. It's like, this hotel contains chemicals that might cause cancer. It's alert fatigue. No one ever cares or listens to things that might contain cancer. So that's, I think, one of the worst examples of like California legislature. But on the plus side, they are listening to companies. They're amending the bill. They seem somewhat willing to take feedback on this. So maybe it could be beneficial. And we know that other states are going to follow their same, they're going to follow the lead of California. So, and also notably California, it's not like Wyoming's doing it and hoping everyone listens. Like California is the absolute geographic center of the universe when it comes to AI research. So, although I guess arguably they could all move to Florida, Joe Rogan style. Like they could just be like, all right, peace out, we're leaving. Yeah. I mean, it's tough, but like, it's a lot of money. At least the Bay Area, that's one of the main things they have going for them. And they have a lot economically not going for them. So it's like, I'm sure that is a tough political thing, but I don't know. We'll see.
I'm so glad they stopped complaining about the radiation. I mean, and the folks that were complaining probably were the ones that had beepers on their hips for a long time, but want to complain about radiation, but it's right in your hip. So, yeah.
So let me ask you guys this. What's worse, no regulation or bad regulation?
No regulation.
Depends on what you mean by bad regulation.
I think bad is worse than none.
It could go multiple different ways. Like you could have bad regulation due to corruption, or you could have excessive bad regulation, or you could have bad regulation that gives the appearance of helping somehow, and that doesn't actually do any good at all.
So, Michael, let's take what you just said. How would you apply that to AI?
That's a good one.
Well, I mean, now I've got to remember all the different types of bad regulation that I just said.
I mean, one joke is like, okay, so they're requiring that companies have a way to turn this off. Is there just going to be a compliance document that says, in the event of an emergency, we'll run the command shut down now on the web server? Like, is that going to be the document? Love the engineers. Like,
no, they're going to have the cables underneath a guillotine before they're plugged in.
Is that going to be? That's what I'm saying.
And chop.
Is that where this is going to end up? Where like cut the power to the building? Like is actually a thing?
Shut down. -H wins.
Is there going to be like a laser trained at the memory chips that's going to melt them? Like, how are we like that's, I think I'm joking, but it is an example of like, if you require people to be able to do this, it's kind of on some level, like, what is that going to be? Is it going to be cut the power to the building? Is it going to be like, because of how these things scale, is it like shut down the whole internet? Like, I don't know what the...
Well, and then on top of it all, it's a matter of how many locations do they have those machines set up in, and what is in jurisdiction, what is out of jurisdiction at that.
Like, does cutting power to the building even do any good at all? Or did it just shut it down in that one spot, and every other, redundant other data center that they've got is still up and running?
Right.
Yeah. I know. Maybe
exactly.
Maybe the engineers will look at the regulation and be like, yes, we can go back to mainframes. Yeah.
Oh, man.
One of the things we are looking at in the bill, so I want to continue the conversation about good regulation versus no regulation or bad regulation. So one of the things that the AI companies brought up as part of the discussion of the bill is downstream harms. And that's one thing I'm glad we're talking about it with AI. We didn't necessarily talk about it when cybersecurity came along. So let's take a look at what happened with CrowdStrike earlier this year. Look at the downstream harms of that situation. It's not a breach. It was, let's just call it the meltdown, the CrowdStrike meltdown. So I'm kind of excited to see that legislation is looking at least acknowledging that there could be downstream harms of using AI. But I think the big corporations are also saying we're trying to protect ourselves. So if somebody downstream uses our models incorrectly, we don't want to be held liable. But at the same time, government wants to say, listen, if your AI takes lives or cause significant safety concerns, we need to address that.
Well, and I'm going to go a little bit tangential on here. Doesn't that already mean that we need a privacy bill to stop the AI in some instances? Because already data privacy and AI sort of go hand in hand with how the LLMs learn from the data coming in. I mean, we've seen it with things like Meta AI and stuff, where they're pulling in the data without actual real consent.
Yeah.
Isn't that already damaging things enough? Isn't that already causing problems? Couldn't that already be causing problems downstream for people?
Yeah, and I think there were even like some instances to where it ingested like bad joke advice from Reddit, and it's like, okay, there was the how do I keep the cheese from sliding off my pizza? I'm sure somebody understands that reference. And like the AI, said, hey, use some Elmer's glue on it. And well, that was taken from like a Reddit thread. People found that actual Reddit thread. Even worse though was that, digging through that, they were finding that it consumed like some bad advice regarding suicide prevention. And that's catastrophic, for being able to ingest that type of bad advice for downstream impact, or just separating out that bad advice for even privacy concerns. Like what happens if like AI accidentally ingests and then produces sensitive information? How do you cut that off? Like if you just cut the power line to it, well, great, you still have a database that has all that information in it. How do you pull that sensitive information out of the AI model so that it doesn't get distributed to the general public?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like, are we essentially building a system that's too complex to effectively regulate? I think that a lot of AI models, as data gets fed in, it's not necessarily clear, how that data is structured internally, where like a human could potentially, like examine it themselves and without having something else to kind of process it. So, is that type of regulation on what data goes into it or anything else even possible beyond just, saying you're not allowed to put this type of data into an AI model? You're not allowed to collect from these types of sources.
Yeah. I mean, you can say you're not allowed to collect from these types of sources, but you need to have a control for, okay, well, what happens if it does?
Sure.
Like, I could say, just for BHIS or the audience, like, what happens if, like, all the pen test reports, like, somehow accidentally get ingested by AI, and now you can query them and go, oh, hey, I'm trying to hack into
company A or something.
Company A, how do I get in? And it says, well, according to this, like, Black Hills Information Security pen test report that they did on this date, they were able to find these sort of vulnerabilities. Everybody's heads would melt with that, but they go, it's like, well, you weren't supposed to put that in the AI. It's like, well, it's there now. All of these, how do you take that out? How do you stop people from accessing that information?
ChatGPT,
you can't just say, well, they broke the rules and we're just going to find them, because that's not going to help company A. That's like, well, we just got hacked because of what AI ingested Black Hills pen test reports. Doesn't help out Black Hills because they go, well, all of our pen test reports got ingested and you have no recourse for it. So, yeah.
AI is making folks kind of rethink things. The policy writers have a lot of work to do. People who are like creating more like newer, up-to-date security controls have a lot of work to do. We all have a lot of work to do when it comes to AI in general. So,
yeah.
Yep.
I'd say we're just
ready.
I'd say we just quacked this article wide open.
Oh.
So what more tales do we have to go with today?
We have to. That's a good question. Does anyone have any other articles that they're passionate about? We got Rambo attacks. Another stun hack.
I like that one just because it sounds cool.
I could say that we could segue to something that smells.
We could talk about the Olympic, Olympic ransomware. I guess we're calling it. Who gets gold? Okay. Who's going to get gold in this year's ransomware Olympics? Probably Brain Cipher, which is a threat actor I've never heard of. Has anyone heard of Brain Cipher before?
No, I thought it was Brian something too. I read it as Brian. I was like, who's this Brian guy?
Hello, my name is Cipher. Brian Cipher.
I was like, that is an awesome security name. Like, someone should grab that as a handle if they don't have it
look,
yet.
He's promised 300 gigs of a data leak. Promised it.
Okay, so the incident affects French national museums. It only happened during the Olympics, so it's barely even an Olympic ransomware. I would say didn't even qualify for the event. But I mean, what is 300 gigs of data from museums? I guess it could be sensitive data, like people who bought tickets or something like that. But in my head, it's just like a bunch of like guided tours of various museums. Like, it's just not very like I don't think of museums as having a lot of sensitive data, but
no.
Do you think
donors or something?
Do you think he was working around the clock on this?
I think he was
probably
Brian Cipher.
Yeah,
I'd say Brian Cipher was working around the clock all day.
Click, cluck, click, cluck. Yeah,
I mean, yeah. I guess keep an eye on the. Allegedly, they're claiming the attack. So
yeah,
and I can't stop seeing it as Brian Cipher now. So
you're welcome.
Apparently, the payload is. Apparently, the ransomware is based on Lockbit 3.0, so it's kind of a known malware.
So what I'm guessing, where the vibe I'm getting here is, yeah, it's just another thing. It's not as sexy as everyone thinks it is. It's just another attack. Is that fair to say?
Pretty much, and it's barely even Olympics related. But we have to cover the ransomware corner of the show. We have a whole region of the internet for ransomware, so.
Yeah, I think though it's using Lockbit and evolving it a little bit to, that I'm trying to read in it's equipped with more persistent and evasion techniques. So when you go, it's yet another one that uses Lockbit, but it's doing more persistence and evasion techniques. And I think it is important that we still bring this up in like the ransomware corner because it's making those incremental things just so it doesn't kind of come out of left field and people go like, oh, holy cow, how did Lockbit evolve to like 4.0 and has all of these evasive techniques and it's super complex now and I don't know how to defend about this. Like, where did this come from? It's like, well, it did that in like small increments. So when you hear these reports going, hey, it introduced something new, we're likely in another month going to have another report saying, hey, they used Lockbit just like, Brain Cipher or Brian Cipher did, only they did something additionally new. And you get those small steps that you go, okay, well, how did we wind up here? It's like, well, it's because of all the small steps that we pointed out along the way.
So basically we could say that they weren't winging it.
Oh man. There's a part of me that like feels like we're way overdue for a big vulnerability disclosure. And I'm just like, scared waiting for what it's going to be. I feel like it's been a while since anything crazy happened. Maybe I'm just like too paranoid, but
it's going to be the vulnerability that they couldn't get patched in time for it to be discussed at Black Hat and DEF CON.
Okay.
So there's going to be something that's going to, that shoe's going to drop.
You're right. Maybe we just kind of, I don't know. Let's just hope that nothing bad happens. That's what I do.
Do you think?
Let's talk about Navy ships trying to get Wi-Fi.
Yeah,
I thought that was a pretty funny story.
If something smells foul, it might be your stinky Wi-Fi.
Well, what they say is if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, then it's a Wi-Fi.
Yep.
So this article is kind of interesting, but I guess basically,
I'm sorry, the jokes are laying eggs at this point.
Okay, yeah. The Navy. So this is basically a story about how Navy chiefs conspired to get themselves illegal warship Wi-Fi, aka Starlink. So basically, the chiefs, the commanders of the ship, installed Starlink and secretly put it on top of the ship and called it STINKY, which is
so. And that's where I put in that additional article, because I don't think they called it STINKY, because like the Ars Technica article, they updated with their link saying, oh, it turns out that STINKY was actually like a default name for some time. And they were like, they didn't find that believable either. But then it was like, oh, well, then Mr. Musk, had the tweet saying like, hey, from at this point, we're just going to name the default one STINKY. And then if you feel embarrassed by having that, like, fix your network.
Project STINKY. All right.
Okay. So I was never, I was never I've never been without internet for an extended period of time unless it was voluntary. But is it worth breaking the law just to get, like, also, why don't they just have internet on ships?
Well,
like what is going on?
Is it worth like degrading the OPSEC of the entire ship in order to just get Wi-Fi and
so you could be on Reddit?
I mean, yeah.
Well, the question is, why can't they already be on Reddit? I want to start with that. Why don't Navy ships have internet? Is this a security thing? Is it just a?
And there was the thing. This could go back to like the recent. I'm thinking of like Darknet Diaries, like the most recent one where they talked about like a comms blackout, that somebody died. There was like an incident where a soldier lost their lives. They go immediate into like a comms blackout because they need to notify the family first before somebody posts something on Reddit.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Because you don't want to have like some Reddit post from like a Navy ship going, oh, we took some fire, some combat. We only had like, three servicemen died, and everything. And that winds up on Reddit. And then you get the family members going, how, Department of the Navy, please explain to me how I found out about this through a Reddit post before your officials called me. So and that was like the Darknet Diary was talking about like Evil Mog, in his stories and his history, that's like he just had to shut down comms blackout in that theater.
So it's about control, which for a naval ship with a bunch of missiles on board seems relatively important.
Yeah.
So it's about the Navy being able to control what information is coming and leaving on the ship.
Yeah, the article actually says it can be for a variety of reasons that include operational security. It says that the crew's internet access is regularly restricted while underway. So, and it can be even to preserve bandwidth for the mission, to keep the ship safe from nefarious online attacks, etc. So, like, it sounds like there are times whenever the entire ship does have internet access for the crew. It's just that at other times they have restricted that access, probably for good reason. So, like, to circumvent that seems like a terrible idea given the, like, what your job function is in this role, where, I mean, it sounded like I don't know, like military ranks and stuff. It sounded like a fairly high ranking enlisted person on the ship. So
Michael,
probably.
Do you think somebody clucked up here?
Yeah, I'd say so.
So, okay. The question I have, so this was kind of like, it was like a little ring of like high up people that had access to the STINKY Wi-Fi.
Well, the chiefs. So the officers didn't have access,
right,
and the lower enlisted didn't have access. It was just that circle of chiefs that had access, and really went to like extremes to conceal it. Because I was reading also that it's like they were rifling through the suggestion box for the captain and the commander, where people would like put in these things being like, hey, what is this Wi-Fi network doing? They would take those little like notes out of the suggestion box and shred them and be like, he doesn't, they don't need to know anything. So yeah, and I think it was just for, the top enlisted guys that were, wanting to watch ESPN or, check.
I mean, I will say like there are plenty of examples in the past where data leaked from military can do damage to real things and real operations. But I will say, like, you could argue that being this high up should grant you access to internet, unfettered internet for, I mean, it's funny to me that they don't just Google like how to fix a battleship or something. Like, like I know there's like procedures and stuff, but I feel like there's plenty of scenarios where being able to have chiefs being able to read the internet, like arguably that information that could be used by the enemy could also be used by them, like watching the Twitter of the ship they're following. Like, you know what I mean?
Internal threats galore.
I know it's intelligence
Insider
and
threat,
technically some other military entity should be getting that and filtering it down to them. But like, I guess I'm just surprised like that the Chiefs don't have internet access as a
or
perk.
you could sit there and go, you mentioned Twitter. Who owns Starlink, and what do they think about the current war in Ukraine?
Yeah.
And would they be able to know where this Starlink satellite is and go, hey, that's information that is valuable. So yeah, there you have.
I mean, for sure, but how many other ships do you think have Starlink? And I mean, if they were to just look at a map of all, like they would have to know. Yeah, I mean, it is terrifying from a privacy perspective what you could do if you were monitoring all the traffic and location of naval ships. Like that is such an intelligence leak for the U.S. Like, and of course, it's illegal. Yeah.
There's others that would have Starlink, but the Navy would know which ones those are and be able to control appropriately instead of sending a ship out for operations that where they don't know that it's like, oh, we didn't know this had a Starlink satellite and it is beaconing its location to some that have that insight. So they wouldn't be able. The ones that have Starlink, they'd be able to control for that,
right?
Variable.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that the person who perpetrated it, or at least who got in trouble for perpetrating it, only got demoted. They did not. There was no criminal action or no they're just demoted. So back to the ranks of people who don't have Wi-Fi. All right, what's next? What else is happening in the world? I mean, there was APT 29 stuff. APT, that's old news. We all know about APT 29. There's more stunt hacking. We could talk about the TSA thing.
I guess it's at an all-time high.
Apparently, the TSA is vulnerable to SQL injection. Yeah. So basically, this is an article from The Verge. Researchers say a bug let them add fake pilots to rosters used for TSA checks. They essentially found Ian Carroll wrote this blog post in August. And then Sam Kerr is the other person responsible for this. They found a third-party website that the TSA uses. The third party is called Flycast. Why it's not Flyquack, we don't know. But they provide smaller airlines to the known crew member system. Basically, they're giving access to be able to have smaller airlines able to have pilots that can kind of sweep through security easily. But SQL map was used to add the username of tick or 1 = 1 and a password of tick parentheses or MD5. Yeah. So basically they SQL injected their way into an admin of Air Transport International account. And how is their SQL injection? I guess it's the airline industry. They're notorious for having tech debt out the wazoo. The aerospace industry does. So
yeah, the kicker is that it didn't affect anything like your Americans, your Deltas, your Uniteds, because they use their own systems. So it literally was these smaller ones, and the smaller airlines are going to tend to be at smaller airports overall. So.
Well, but isn't that data shared, right? Like, isn't the KCM system shared between different airports? So I could add myself to the system at a smaller airport, then go to a bigger airport and be like, oh, I'm actually scheduled to fly. Maybe it would hit some kind of check where it'd be like, oh, you're not actually on the roster. Like, you don't have a flight.
Oh, this airline doesn't come, or this airline does not exist at this airport.
Or that.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. All I'm saying is people in chat have already called this out, but clearly they're winging it.
Birds of a feather.
Fly together.
I really hope Ryan Cipher makes a comeback. Slow week. I can't believe we went on break for 2 weeks and there's no good hacks.
I think
there's so many so many breaches. Durex India, Dick's Sporting Goods, Avis, Planned Parenthood, Halliburton.
Hackers inject malicious JS in the Cisco store.
I think this is just a setup for the big one.
Is this just a sign for the sign of the times that there's 5 big breaches and we're not going to talk about any of them because no one's surprised anymore? Like, it doesn't even matter. Planned Parenthood, Avis, Dick's Sporting Goods. Yeah, I mean, whatever. I will say,
all flocked together.
Okay, the one that now I think about more is Durex India. Durex is a company that makes contraceptive products, and I guess I didn't really think anyone was buying those directly from the manufacturer, but apparently they are, and now their data is breached. It's kind of really rough situation. No pun intended.
Don't touch it. Don't touch it.
Don't do it.
Don't do it.
Yeah, I mean, this could be a really embarrassing data breach used for a lot of really bad blackmail situations. It's ironic. I think this is the most impactful one. Maybe Planned Parenthood could be pretty bad too. But, no one's going to care if you were renting a car or buying, tight shorts or whatever at Dick's Sporting Goods. But this one could be more impactful.
Well, I might disagree with you on that one, Corey, because I'm going to try and stay out of politics here, but in some rural parts of the United States, you don't have access to doctors or nurses. And in the event of an STD or getting pregnant, Planned Parenthood may be your only healthcare option.
True.
So that there is a data breach at I would call them a healthcare organization. I'm not getting into politics here. I think it's pretty profound. And also, I will talk about politics for a second here. We've got a lot of conversations happening in our country right now about teenagers, young people giving consent on their gender and their sexuality. This Planned Parenthood data breach stirs the pot on that whole conversation as well. So it's not just about the data being leaked, it's what are the ramifications? What relationships are injured? Does somebody have to go down a healthcare alternative that they weren't considering or didn't want to? So sometimes when we look at data breaches, there are socioeconomic, socio-political elements to data breaches, not just vulnerabilities.
Very true. I mean, that's a good point. I think also it was, to get a little bit more specific, it was only Planned Parenthood Montana. So it's kind of an interesting, specific location, which is probably a political battleground for that kind of issue. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see who perpetrated it. I don't think we've seen an example of a U.S. politically motivated type attack like that. So if it was a U.S. perpetrator, it'd be very interesting. So stay tuned on the show and we'll let you know if it was. So let's talk about the city of Columbus, named for the definitely not imperialist Christopher Columbus, probably. So they sued a researcher who disclosed the impact of a cyber or a ransomware attack. Columbus fell victim. This was on July 18th. They disclosed it shortly thereafter. Of course, they offered people free credit monitoring services. And a researcher.
That's a standard practice.
Yes. So basically, a researcher named David Leroy Ross or Connor Goodwolf started telling local media that basically they were downplaying the attack. It was Residia.
The city of Columbus was saying that the attackers had stole corrupted and encrypted data, and Ross turned around and said, "No, it in fact was
it's not encrypted or corrupted.
And social security numbers and other types of sensitive data."
So basically, they were saying, "Oh, nothing really sensitive was disclosed because it was corrupt or encrypted," and then that person was being like, "No, it wasn't corrupted or encrypted. It has SSNs, personal information of police officers, reports, arrest records."
I I think the funniest
So-
line on it
Pretty
was
serious.
that Columbus claimed that although shared publicly, the information on the site on Resita's site was only accessible to individuals who have computer expertise and tools necessary to download data from the dark
This
web.
is basically just the F12 hacker comes back. Is that what this is?
That's what it sounds like.
Because so the city is accusing them, Ross, of interacting with the ransomware gang to download the deleted or the leaked information. If that's illegal, I've committed a lot of crimes because these sites are just have a bunch of download buttons and they don't require any technical expertise to access. It's pretty much just a site that says click the button to download the data. And downloading it and investigating it doesn't seem at all sensitive. I guess we'll have to stay tuned on how this pans out, but I feel like there's no way this stands up in court, right? I mean,
and Ross wasn't. He's just an independent researcher, right? He wasn't part of like the city or had any inside knowledge or employer. Okay, cool.
I mean, the city was seeking a restraining order. It bars the order,
Oh
the
my
restraining.
God.
Okay, so can you imagine this? This is a restraining order against the data he downloaded. It's like, you can't look at those files, bad boy. So basically, the order bars Ross from disseminating the data, but does not prevent him from discussing it or the stolen data or the type of the data. So, like, it doesn't actually stop him at all. It's totally just the mayor called someone and said, make this disappear. And they tried to, and they failed. And now it's getting the Streisand effect. And we're talking about it here when none of us live in Columbus, hopefully.
I think it's a really interesting article because all of us are security researchers to a varying extent. And this really feels like rotten apples. The city was embarrassed and they're going after him and they're leveraging restraining orders to basically quiet him. And, the question, excuse me, that I have, does the city's cybersecurity posture suck? And that's
Yes,
not being,
they got
we're not
ransomware.
talking about that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
That's
agree that their security posture probably sucks, and I think they're handling it terribly. So I'd like to encourage everybody that's watching to go download the data from the dark web,
Oh,
take
man.
screenshots of it, redact it appropriately so no one's no innocent people's social security numbers are put it on like social media, and then like tweet it to local government so they can see just how easy it is for everyone on the internet to get access to that.
Well, it's also, I mean, I think, I'm assuming,
Goodness.
you're kind of joking there, but like, it is genuinely worth it from a privacy perspective to make sure that your data isn't disclosed in this breach. Whether or
Oh,
not
absolutely.
whether you're a police officer or someone who got arrested or someone who just lived in Columbus for a time, like being able to look for your own data in breaches is totally allowed. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, of course, but there are some DOJ documents about like this type of information, like open source intelligence data. From my
Right.
perspective, it's okay to store. It's only bad. It's essentially it comes down to intent, and the intent to inform the public that this data is putting people at risk, because there's definitely people out there that are going to say, "Oh, well, Columbus said it wasn't bad. I'm sure my data is safe," and then their identity gets stolen 6 months later because they never engaged, because it never got their data. They thought it wasn't really disclosed. I will say, like, it's got to be a mess up on their side that they just said it was encrypted or whatever when it wasn't. So, like, that's just bad forensics. They had bad security posture to begin with because they got ransomware.
Right.
2, they have bad forensics or investigating after the fact of what was taken, what formats were taken. And 3, they have bad PR of trying to silence someone for talking about a very public issue. I'm assuming that the individual that disclosed it has their data disclosed. So it's totally fair to download and look through it to see if you're in it. Is your social security number in there? Is your, parking tickets in there or anything else? It's not great.
Well, and also this is the type of thing, like, even I think I mentioned it when like the Lockbit had all of their data released, in the amount of stuff that was part of a data breach that went contrary to attestations of the company. So it could very well be that the city says, like, we have all these attestations and we've put on all sorts of legal documents that this is encrypted. And then, well, now there's this ransomware that happened and we're going to stand by our attestation that it's encrypted. This guy's coming out saying it's not. And now we get into a lot of trouble because we lied to regulators or for certifications and et cetera, et cetera. So
totally.
But I'll say here, those in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. We've been in situations where we thought something was encrypted or we thought a file share was turned off and it wasn't.
Yeah,
So
but we're not public relations for a city government.
True.
That's the difference. True. Because if you're publishing something that involves people's personal data and safety, you need to make sure it's accurate before you publish it.
I'll give you that.
I'm sure the person that published this was just like, guys, everyone can click download. Are you crazy? Like, it's on some level, it's not even intent. It's just basically being like, are you living in reality or are you just crazy? Yeah. I think it's time for the show to duck out.
To fly south for the winter.
I hope no one engages in any quackery this week. Kill it with fire. Have a good week, everyone. Bye-bye.
Later.